So, earlier this week, I heard the unfortunate news that Emer Prevost, aka Hellsing 920, had passed away because of a hernia and surgery complications. Now, as of recent, I haven't had the best of perception of the guy, unfortunately, because of a couple things that had occurred. But at the same time, I will say, though, that throughout the last 8 or so years that I've known the guy on YouTube, and even a couple of conversations or run-ins that I had with the guy, I will say that I did enjoy knowing him for the amount of time that I did. So, to basically kind of make a little brief history, I'll basically go down what Emer is best known for. So, starting with 2007, he was known for making game reviews known as, I think, God Awful Games. And during a time when you had a lot of angry video game nerd ripoffs and knockoffs and people that were imitating him, Emer was one of the few that went about their own style of reviewing. I want to say that, in a way, his style of reviewing is a bit more similar to Some Call Me Johnny. He was descriptive, did the best he could to basically have a sense of humor, but also was very laid back and down to earth, which I think made him a bit entertaining to watch. Unfortunately, that didn't last too long because Fox came by and took his account down. YouTube is YouTube after all. Even back then, they had a lot of copyright issues, and Emer, unfortunately, was taken down because of the copyright issues that were being reported and falsely accused of and whatnot just back then. And I think he ended up going to live video later on. And then after that, he came back to YouTube, but he did rants. Be they rants on random occurrences and different people, such as SPACs and the different people he ran into in real life in the movie theaters, or Fanboy Chronicles. The Fanboy Chronicles was one of the first things I knew of him at least, related to his content, because when it came to, what videos of his I watched first, I believe it was the Dragon Ball video that I watched. Because that was around the time when Dragon Ball Evolution was about to come out, and honestly, hearing his opinion was a bit different. Of course, he had a little bit of a few flaws here and there and within his rants, but at the same time, it was still enjoyable nonetheless, and I was hooked to say the least, as I started watching more and more of his videos, and then eventually I subscribed. I think what was interesting about his rant was the fact that he basically had a very different opinion than what was generally said. At times, he did come off as a bit of a contrarian. He did have opinions that were questionable, but at the same time, his opinion and the way he basically carried out his opinion, the way he voiced them, was interesting nonetheless, because he still managed to have a very down-to-earth, very mellow and calm ranting voice. There were a lot of other people, though, that did rant as well, but most of the time they were either screaming or had a very angry tone to their voice that sounded very loud and whatnot. But I think when it came to Emer and his ranting, he was just very chill. Then, of course, afterwards, he did the console rants, and I guess I want to call them reviews, because he basically analyzed the negatives and positives of those different consoles. And I will say that he actually did a pretty good job analyzing them, minus the PC one, which is one of his more infamous videos. His other infamous videos being his Catwoman review, as well as his Men in Black 3 review. Which, to basically segue into that, he also did movie reviews. But before that, he also did comic book reviews known as the Longbox Chronicles. And the way he reviewed comics and movies were, well, a bit different, because if you want to compare the comic book reviewing with Linkara's was a bit more based on skits and jokes depending on the situation that's given. With Emer, he just basically made a few jokes and whatnot, but also analyzes and critiques the different story aspects of the comic, basically. And then there was reaction and review, where instead of just cutting up and showing clips, which if he did that, his channel would have gotten shit canned within, I would say, a few years, or not even a few years. I would probably say a few months, considering how very protective of their property a lot of these movie companies are. Emer would basically just show himself watching the movie, but it would make comments on them too. But then at the end, he would do a very analytical, I want to say, analysis of the movie itself. And I think that's what made his reaction and review film videos a lot more interesting. I will say, though, that when it comes to, again, him and how he voices his opinions, there were a lot of things that I did agree with. And then there were things that I obviously did not agree with at all. And, I mean, that's A-okay. Again, there were times I found the way he voiced his opinion to be a bit obnoxious. His attitude could have been a bit better in my personal perspective, but that's just me. And, well, a few other people that seem to also take issue with them as well. But at the same time, I want to say that Emer had a lot of influence within the community. Considering how we have a lot of videos that are basically talking about DeviantArt cringe, fandom cringe, and whatnot, rants on different fandoms, I want to say that Emer was pretty much one of the starts of that, because he pretty much takes a look and analysis into these different fandoms that he would look at, and I think that's what basically started people to talk about different fandoms and whatnot. Not to mention, his format of reviewing movies was actually somewhat original. I would say it's somewhat similar to Riff Tracks, but instead of commentating on the entire film for about an hour, he cuts it up, makes a few comments and jokes that I thought were some of them were pretty funny, I will admit. And then, just honestly, I think that's what made him the most interesting, was the fact that he manages to not basically parrot everything. He just stuck to his guns and just voiced his opinions. Again, regardless of if I agreed with him or not. I will say, though, as a last note, that the way he died is very tragic. As I mentioned, he died of a hernia complication, as well as the complications that he dealt with during surgery, where, unfortunately, he was basically, let's not kid ourselves, he was pretty obese. And unfortunately, being obese causes a lot of health issues. And he had a lot of health issues, it seems. I mean, he also had a severe leg infection, and unfortunately, that's pretty much what just took his life. And I think what we can take away from this is that it's very important that we watch after ourselves, watch after our health, and I think Emer would honestly agree with me on this if he were still with us. I mean, if any of you remember, he did a video or commentary on Norm's Barstool, where he basically was lecturing, I wouldn't say lecturing, but he was telling the guy that him being somewhat overweight is not healthy, and that the people criticizing Norm for being overweight are also very much on the right, considering that Norm could have died at an early age had he still been overweight. And recently, it seems like Norm Barstool actually ended up losing a bunch of weight, whereas we ended up not seeing that happen with Emer, unfortunately. Now, I'm not here to mock his weight, because that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that it's important that we watch after our health, and I think that is the most important thing. Anyway, guys, I will say, rest in peace, Emer. You were a very entertaining guy, and I think, honestly, I have you and several others, but you especially, to thank for wanting to get me into making videos more often. And I hope you look down upon us with a big smile on your face, and I also hope that the afterlife is a very bright one for you.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and I will see you all